All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Friday. So I'm just gonna dive right in while y'all join. I love doing these on Fridays. I'm gonna tell you why if you don't already know. And the reason for that is that Friday is the day of Venus, according to Vedic astrology, and that's the Vedic system in general. And Venus is the day of the divine feminine. It's the day of the goddess also. All the different gods and goddesses in the Hindu pantheon have a different day. So Friday is the day that we give a little extra worship to the Divine Mother. Again, she's very much connected to the planet Venus. So that's why I love doing them on Fridays. So yay, hi Ajit. Good to see you here. Beautiful. So I'm doing this series this month because I'm getting ready to launch a big program, my biggest program I launch each year starting from last year because it was just birthed last year. So I'm kind of going through some of the themes that we're going to be exploring in the upcoming Temple of Shakti mentorship. But we're going to go deep in these themes just even in these lives. And so today, last Friday, you can still find it on my profile, whatever it's called on Instagram. I always forget, timeline, feed. So you can find the one from last Friday. And last Friday we went over months 1 and 2 and talked about the whole kind of context and lens of living Tantra. So today we're going to go into module or month 3, which is all about the alchemy of opposites. And when we're looking through the tantric lens, this is so much a part of the path and the practice. So when I'm saying the alchemy of opposites, all obviously there's so many different things we can think about. We can think about masculine and feminine. We can think about, day and night, dark and light. And in this case, I am really looking at it as like this dance of what we would call dark and light. And we hold this all very gently in the tantric lens because ultimately the alchemy is that there is, these are just labels that our mind puts on things because our mind is very dualistic in its mechanism, right? And so we decide if something is good or bad, dark or light. There's a feeling tone in our bodies even, right? If we're going through, like for instance, the beginning of a relationship, we're falling in love and there's this sensation in the body, there's this expanse, and that feels really good. And then at the end of a relationship, there might be immense heartache and it just feels like you're dying. And, so we do have these experiences in life. And in a lot of ways, the movement of life and what I'm going to call the movement of Shakti, because that's what it is. It's the movement of the goddess. It's the movement of creation, the movement of the divine feminine. And so we have to learn, what part of our adventure as human beings is learning how to ride these waves, right? And so month 3, we're really looking at this kind of alchemy of opposites, and we're looking at shadow dancing, what I'm calling shadow dancing, and unbridled radiance. So these are both a part of the human experience. We are all radiant in the core of our nature, and we all have trials and tribulations and initiations that we have to go through to kind of uncover this. So we're going to explore this on a very primal level in today's talk because it's all part of the journey. And one of the powerful things about the path of Tantra is that we are not pushing anything away. We are not negating or bypassing the obstacles that we all face uniquely, right? We all have our unique, challenges that we are growing through, right? If we look at a lot of plants, even, some of them need stress, like a tomato plant actually produces more fruit if we stress it a bit, don't give it quite enough water, this kind of thing. Well, in a way, humans are the same way. If we're too comfortable, if everything's just great, we don't tend to really grow and look deeper and move forward. So what I'm really challenging in this topic and in that month of Temple of Shakti is this idea that negative things that happen in our life, our shadows, whatever it is, are actually bad, are actually something that our reaction is to push away. What happens if we, surrender to, or if we even move towards instead of away from? And in the basis of these opposites, we have, on a fundamental level, we have love and fear. And I would say that Tantra is very much a path of love over fear. Love beyond fear would maybe be even a more accurate way to say that. Because we all have fear. And fear is a mechanism of the ego, and the ego's purpose is not a negative one. Again, we want to just get these black and white concepts out of the way when we're looking through the tantric lens, because nothing's black and white. So fear is a mechanism of the ego, and the ego's job is to allow us to experience ourselves as separate so that we can have a unique experience of life, right? We recognize, maybe it's just intellectually at this point, but maybe we've had experiences of really touching that everything is connected, everything is part of a whole, including ourselves. But we wouldn't get this dynamic and diverse and incredible experience if it wasn't of life. I wouldn't think I'm Halo and have this very unique journey that Halo is on if it weren't for the ego. So the ego has a very important role to play. The problem is that I overly identify with the ego. It's not that we want to get rid of the ego, it's just we want to recognize it for what it is. And so whenever we have that mechanism of fear coming up, and through the tantric lens, every negative emotion, every pattern, every reaction, all of these things that we deem as kind of obstacles in our lives, the root of all of that is actually fear. And we might have our different particular flavor of fear. Maybe it's fear of being alone, maybe it's fear of failure, maybe it's fear of being destroyed, something like this. But at the very, very, very core of all of that is actually this fear of the imminence of our annihilation, and that annihilation being our death on one level. Oftentimes, we hear about real hardcore practitioners, and they actually go through a death process before actual death. And that is, in a way, as we're walking on the spiritual path, there is a death. It is a death process in a certain way. We're letting go of these identities that we cling so hard to. And we're going to get into why that is so important, actually, and why the shadow is so important for us to really come to know our unbridled radiance, right? So the core mechanism of all of that stuff is fear. And fear is what separates us. Fear believes that illusion that we are separate, that we are not eternal beings, that we are not a part of this vast ocean of consciousness and love, right? It thinks that we are finite and separate, and that's where almost all of our pain and suffering comes from. So the idea and the practices in the tantric path, the view within the tantric path, is that we're liberating our fear into love. because love is the vast ocean. It's the expanse, right? And fear is this contraction within that. So what happens when we let go? We just, again, become a part of that vast field that is love. And this might sound very hippy-dippy, but when you start to have those experiences, it's very, very real. And it's what we all yearn for. And so often we place that yearning on, the desire for an intimate relationship, or the desire of power and success or fame or having things, or, but at the deeper core of those desires, oftentimes those desires are, first of all, covering up fear that we are insignificant or something like this, that we don't want to touch, we don't want to face. And at the same time, those desires are coming from this deeper place, which is this desire to remember our wholeness. But what happens, Tantra says, what happens if we take that desire and we recognize it for what it actually is, and we aim for that higher aspect of love and fulfillment that is, eternal, that's not temporary, like a relationship or success, or all of those things here are temporary. And that's exactly the reason that we even do aim for something higher, that we do practice, that we do bring our courage into what I'm calling shadow dancing. So again, when we're not looking through such a black and white lens of duality, our shadows, like our personal shadows, our circumstantial obstacles and challenges in life, there's a reorientation that, and this is not a bypass, I really want to say, yes, love beyond fear. It's something we reorient to over and over and over again until we can live there, until we can rest there. And it is a journey, I can tell you. But the most important piece is that we just keep going and we welcome. I was just going to say, it's not a bypass, but we start to look at the shadow and our challenges as gifts instead of parts of ourselves we're ashamed of, instead of pieces we want to cut off or not look at or avoid. There's a difference between avoiding, which is bypassing, right, and welcoming, right, and really allowing these parts of ourselves to be deeply seen because they have messages for us, and they are actually gifts in disguise, because those places that we have our greatest challenges actually are pointing the most directly to our path of liberation, to our path of remembrance of love and wholeness. So it's this divine paradox, and Tantra is just that. It's a divine paradox. When we start to really open to the nature of reality at its, core essence, we're living in this divine paradox. And we have to really watch our minds and, again, that black and white thinking to really start to understand that. And then as we start to understand that it's all a divine paradox, we can expand and have greater capacity to hold the full spectrum. Because as long as we're in that black and white, we're, like a horse with blinders on who can only see one thing at a time. And then we get so stuck on our opinions, and this, we see this so powerfully in this time. Everybody's, like, what I see is real, but it's so much more complex and nuanced and honestly paradoxical. Paradox meaning both are true simultaneously, both sides, it's like, and beyond. So love has that lens. Love has this, what I like to call the equal gaze. And it's this way of looking at everything in life. Now, it's very difficult to do, But the more we can sit back and rest into ourselves, we know we're operating kind of from fear, from ego, when there's a sense of like lurching out of ourselves, needing to defend, needing to prove a point, like we have so many different mechanisms, or it could be getting really small, and, we all have our different ways. But whenever we're not sitting really in our seat, and this is going to move us into unbridled radiance, whenever we're not in our seat, we simply cannot fully see clearly. So Tantra and the practices within this system, the practices I'll be sharing in this particular module of Temple of Shakti, are all about learning how to have we'll have some simple and some more complex tools for coming back to that seat where it's so much easier to have that equal gaze, right? And so what we're looking at, again, we have that I like to call them duality pairs. We have the duality pair of shadow dancing and unbridled radiance. So shadow dancing is the invitation to actually go into those places that make us squirm. Those parts of ourself, or even pains and traumas that we've experienced that we haven't let go, that we're still operating from. And actually finding the gifts, finding the keys, because I feel, from my own experience many times over, we never know how long we're going to be in the bottom of the well. And I think that's actually the most difficult part, is just not knowing when we're going to see the light of day again. But if we can find solace in that place, if we can actually find rest, if we can find the beauty, if we can find the embrace of the Divine Mother, which is very accessible in those points in our life, we maybe have to reach for it a bit, but it's there. We find our beauty, true beauty, not external beauty, but this internal beauty from those places. We find our power from those places. The most powerful people I know, the most powerful people that our world remembers to this day, some of the, I think of Jesus Christ, like these from so far back. They overcame so much adversity, and that's what led to the legacy of their power, because they chose love over fear regardless of that. We remember these people, right? So our greatest power comes from this place, our greatest beauty, and of course, our true wisdom. The most wise people and beings I know, it's not because they've had life handed to them on a gold platter. It's because they've had to face things, they've had to cook in God's sacred fire, they've had to, again, choose love over fear. And we have to do this to come into the next phase, which is that unbridled radiance. So this is always the fun part. We're always more excited to talk about this, but what is our unbridled radiance? I use the term unbridled because all of those coping mechanisms that we have, they're like a bridle, and they control us and they keep us from that full expression of our radiance and what I like to call our essence. So we just talked about ego as a mechanism of fear, as a mechanism that holds fear in place on a certain level, a mechanism of separation. And then we have essence. And this is a theme I really, you've maybe heard me talk about this before if you've been tuning in with me for some time or in any of my courses. But I really like this idea of essence versus ego, and how do we know when we're operating from one versus the other. So what is essence? Essence isn't halo. Essence isn't what I like and dislike, and what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, who I'm with, who I don't like. That's ego, right? Essence is something beyond that. Essence is like the breath of the divine that infuses each of us in a unique way. So it all has a unique fragrance, or it wouldn't be any fun. That's what makes this place so fun. We all get to be different. We all get to have a unique expression. But this is, again, not the expression that, comes onto ego Instagram and starts comparing or copying or whatever, mechanisms to try to feel like you belong or whatever it is, right? It's not that. That's the ego. Thank you, ego. Essence knows that it is full, knows that it is whole, and it's something that arises. So just a good little litmus test for whether you are operating from ego or essence. Ego is oftentimes, you're very in your head, can be very disconnected from the body. There's from the mind an outward movement. Whereas with essence, it's something that like bubbles up. I like to think of champagne, like the bubbles in golden champagne that just bubbles up from the inside out and overflows. There's an infinite abundance of our essence, of our essential energy when we really tap into it. But all of us, myself included, after practicing for 10 plus years now, I will forget. And essence is something we have to tap into again and again. Another discernment between the operation of ego versus essence is that ego really likes to build itself up. It's like layers and layers and layers of identity. And, it has this like, am I good enough yet? Am I enough? Am I too much? It's got this, it oscillates between, those black and white thinking. Whereas essence is a process of stripping down, of coming to the core, that's what essence means. It's the essential part of ourself. And we don't find this if we're busy adding to what I like to call our spiritual wardrobe. We find this when we say, oh, wow, I'm really identifying with that. What happens if I let that go? And you don't have to let it go. But in some cases, you'll, on my journey, I've asked for it. I've had things taken from me that I was very identified with, like being a dancer and 2 knee injuries later being like, oh, well, who am I if I'm not that, So we all have those moments, and there's going to be a great, final exam for all of us of can we fully let go of everything we've created and loved in this life, of these bodies, of this personality. But what does go with us into our subsequent lives is our essence. Our essence is eternal. And it's part of that greater whole that is love, consciousness. So it's very radiant in nature, and the shadow dancing is a prerequisite because we have to identify and work on those parts of ourselves that, like I said, unbridled radiance, that are keeping us bridled in separation, in smallness, in our patterns and coping mechanisms. We have to identify the roots of those pieces. So we have to go shadow dancing. It's like soul spelunking to be able to identify those pieces and start to loosen the knots so that our true nature that's already there. It's not, you don't have to go finding it. You just have to uncover it. It's a divine excavation of a jewel, of a treasure trove that's already deep inside of you. So this is the kind of soul focus of the third month in Temple of Shakti. Is we're going to spend the first half of the month navigating shadow dancing. I'm going to be bringing in some tantric views as well as some Taoist practice for emotional alchemy, because the emotions are what make us really feel like something so real. And we can start to work with that energy. That's all emotion is. It's energy in motion, and that's Shakti. So we just become allies rather than adversaries, right? So we're going to work on some emotional alchemy. We're going to really practice finding comfort in the dark. We have to make friends with the dark, because as long as we're adversaries, we can't possibly know our wholeness, because our wholeness is inclusive. It's not exclusive. So how do we start to befriend those aspects of ourself, those parts of our life's journey, things we might be facing right now in our present lives? So it's a practice. It's not easy, but it's something that more and more we become efficient at. Yeah. We are also going to go, because Temple of Shakti is, at this point, it's an all-women container. We are going to go deep into what I like to call the womb story, because there is this deep arc of the feminine journey that takes place in the womb, the heart. I mean, it's really our full journey as women, but there's so much to transmute there. There's so much material in the story of the womb, and by the story of the womb, I mean all the different experiences that we can go through as women, which can, branch from the most profound merging ecstasies to some of the most excruciating agony. It's this whole spectrum of an experience. And so just going into the womb and working with the womb, we can start to alchemize this, darkness and light, the shadow dancing and the unbridled radiance, and really start to expand our capacity and realize also, which I think is so important, that we're not alone. That women everywhere, and in fact humanity, are all in this together. We all have these shared travails. We all have these shared journeys that we are on. And I think there's a really big power in that, because again, if we are living in separation, we think we're alone. And it's really difficult to make progress when you feel like you're alone. But when we realize that there's a collective theme, that something bigger than us is happening here, that we're part of love awakening through a vast matrix of intelligence, that's living through us, it's a really different experience of healing and coming into, wholeness and the radiance that is all of our birthright. In the tantric lens, we're all going to get there. It's just, some of us might have to take the scenic route or a bypass or something like this, and some might find a shortcut, but we're all going to get there. So then in Unbridled Radiance, we are looking at the essential self, looking at practices to anchor that more and live from that place. And what starts to happen is something really, really precious and miraculous, and it benefits not only you, but it benefits everyone and everything around you. Is you start to express in what I like to call living gesture. And living gesture is this idea that every, movement or gesture or word we speak, or the way we look at ourselves, at our loved ones, at the stranger at the grocery store, the way we even move, the way we create, what we're bringing into the world, how we navigate our work, it starts to become infused with presence, which automatically translates to beauty. And I use the idea of walking the beauty way a lot. Well, that's it. It's this living gesture that when we are more and more, frequently rooted in our essential self, our unbridled radiance, that automatically that is the ripple. And that is the experience. And everything becomes more rich at that point, And again, I want to just go over and over again, because I don't want anyone to listen to this and be like, I don't think that's possible for me, or that seems unattainable, or something like that. Again, this is a practice, and a practice isn't a destination, it's the journey, right? And so we fall off the horse, we get back on the horse, we forget, we remember, and that's all a part of it. And it's only when we're caught in that lens of duality, which I've brought up many, many times, that one is good and one is bad. They are all equally valuable. And how do we start to see the world in this way? Well, Tantra can help us, because that's what it is about. Tantra is love beyond fear. Tantra is a new operating system. And so, this is what we are exploring in Temple of Shakti, which is the 6-month mentorship program. I think probably most of you who are tuning into this live have seen plenty about it. I've been blasting, shouting from the rooftops. And what's really special about this program is talking about everything we just talked about today, the accountability. So I was just saying, everything's a practice, it's the journey. Well, sometimes it's helpful to be with a group, to be with a sangha. We call it in Tantra. Sangha is a group of practitioners. So we're all on the journey together. We meet regularly. We are holding each other accountable to keep going. And that, whatever that looks like, because we don't know, it's Ma. It's all Ma. It's all the goddess. It's her weaving. So we're stepping into her temple, essentially. And we will see what comes through with all that. So that being said, I'm going to start winding up for today while I talk a little bit more about Temple of Shakti and what the rest of this month looks like. If you have any questions or comments, please pop them in before I close the live, because I'm sad to notice those all disappear once I close the live. So feel free. And so Temple of Shakti is starting on January 31st, which is still a little ways away, but it's going to go by really fast. So if you have been hanging on the edge of potentially joining us, there's a couple different opportunities. First of all, you can go ahead and be a full yes and do the full payment, or I also have a payment plan that's available, and I have scholarship applications. So if you're interested in receiving a partial scholarship, I have 3 kind of tiers of scholarship. So you can just message me directly and I'll send you the application. And because so much of the content is based, from Indian heritage, I am prioritizing for scholarship positions people of Indian heritage, but that shouldn't discourage you from applying, because who knows. And then I also have a sign up with a sister discount. So if you have a beautiful sister who you want to share this powerful journey with, you can join us and each receive $250 off. And final opportunity for this month, next week on Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a free webinar. And this webinar is called Temple Arts of the Shakti Priestess. We're going there, and I'm really excited. So we're going to go more into some of the practices that are going to be part of Temple of Shakti. So that is free, and you can sign up. I have a link in my bio link where you can register for free for that webinar. It's going to be next Wednesday, I think the 19th at 11 a.m. PST, and you'll get a discount coupon if you join us. And then I'm also going to keep doing these lives. So there will be, I guess, maybe 2 more of these lives. And we're going to talk next week about months 4 and 5, which are the most exciting because they're about Shakti and Shiva. So we spend, a lot of the months are broken up into 2 parts, but they each, of course, get a full month. So I will be sharing a sadhana, so we'll be working with a goddess and using the tools of mantra and yantra, which are the sound and light body of the goddess, and essentially the main tools of tantric practice. So that's going to be really special. So I'll share more about that next week, and then the final live will be about the last month of Temple of Shakti, which is all about dharma. So how do we take everything that we've just journeyed through and bring it into, kind of what I was just saying, walking that beauty way, offering our gifts, being in, divine alignment where thy will, my will is thy will, kind of orientation. And I'm also going to share more about the 3 class series that are part of it in that last live. I'll share just a little bit right now. So the 3 main tools that have been my practices and my allies on my journey are the Taoist practices that I actually was initiated into by my father, And then I deepened into the realms of sexual energy cultivation via the lineage of Mantak Chia. And so I'm not a big fan of Tantra being, always kind of trip on how to say this in a way that is not triggering, but the kind of dilution of Tantra into sexuality practice is not my favorite. However, I do like some of those practices, and I do believe that we have to address sexuality and sexual energy because there's a huge potency in our sexual energy, first of all. And second of all, if we don't have a healthy relationship to our sexuality, our greater freedom and liberation is simply not possible. So we're going to be having a full class series on the Taoist feminine arts, which are these practices. So it's a 6-week series. You'll get 6 classes all included in Temple of Shakti. So I'm really excited because I've taken a bit of a break from teaching. That used to be one of my main things I taught. So I'm excited to bring that back and give it energy again and share with all of you who are joining. And then the second class, 6-week class series, is going to be Shakti Temple Dance. So this is going to be really fun, just embodied. We'll be going into all these deep topics in the monthly calls, but then we just get to dance it out, and it will be a structured dance. So we're going to be working with Middle Eastern dance forms, Central Asian dance forms, and classical Indian dance. So there'll be a bit of fusion. We'll probably have some fun, or I will have some fun choreography cooked up for you that we'll be playing with, and working with some themes of elements and different, using dance as that bridge of communion between form and formless, and really letting that devotional feminine heart come through. And finally, I'm going to talk more about this, like I said in the last live, but the final class series that we're going to go into is a 6-week Tantra Yoga series. So this is like yoga as it was meant to be presented, where it's not simply a physical practice, although we will be doing asana and postures, but we're also going to be incorporating specific bija mantras for the chakras, specific asanas that have to do with balancing or awakening the energies of the different chakras, or even clearing, and working with different pranayamas to move energy in specific ways in our bodies. And I'll be going, obviously, in the series very deep into what all that looks like, and hopefully you'll have kind of a clear practice to walk away from after that. So long story short, it's going to be amazing. We already have an amazing group together as it is. So if you're feeling it, write me. If you have any questions, I'm here. I'd love to connect. And there's also an option on the website for Temple of Shakti, which is also at the link in my bio, to schedule a 15-minute call with me. So if you have any concerns that feel like they need a conversation, I am more than happy to connect in that way. So you can just book that on there. Okay, were there any questions? It doesn't look like there were questions. I see some beautiful names here of people that I know, and beautiful names of people that I would like to know. Okay. All right, loves, I think that's it then. And I will share this live. So if you came in late and you wanted to catch some more of what happened in the beginning, it will be on my profile just in a moment, and you can catch that later. All right, my loves, have a beautiful Devi Venus Friday and a beautiful weekend, and I hope to see you more as this month goes on. And sending lots of love to all of you. Thanks for joining.